Afternoon. I'm happy to welcome you to Bridgte India's webinar. Today's topic is India's Rooftop Solar Policy Roundup, and it's the concluding webinar in our series on renewable power used by commercial and industrial consumers in India. This is Sangeeta Suresh from Bridgte India, and I would like to introduce our panelists for the day. We are delighted to have Mr. Amitesh Sinha, Joint Secretary MNRE, who will be joining us later this evening. We're very happy to also welcome Mr. Chintan Shah, Director, Technical IREDA, with us here today. Our panelists from the rooftop solar industry today are Mr. Pramod Kalyanshetti, CCO at Mahindra Susten, Mr. Anuvrat Joshi, Head Business Development at Cleantech, and Mr. Damian Miller, CEO of Orb Energy. We also have Mr. Arijit, Head of Distributed Generation from LONGi. He's here to bring to us the views of equipment suppliers in the industry. I'd like to take this time to thank our sponsors, Tata Power Solar and LONGi, as well as our strategic partners, IGEF, for their support in enabling us to bring quality content to our audience. Now on to our agenda for the day. Today we will begin with an introduction by Mr. Vinay Rustagi, Managing Director, Bridgte India. He will be talking to us about the status of rooftop solar policy environment in the country. This will be followed by individual remarks by the panelists, and then we will open the floor for panel discussion. We will have a Q&A session after the panel discussion, but the participants can send in your questions at any time to the text box, through the text box located at the bottom right corner of your panel. Please do mention which of the panelists your questions are directed at. Finally, we will also be conducting an audience poll during the webinar and a few feedback questions at the end of the webinar as well. We request you to please provide your responses so we can curate a few future webinar content. Now over to Vinay, who will set the stage for today's webinar.
Thank you, Sangeeta, and a very warm welcome to all the panelists and everybody who's attending the webinar today. So the focus for the webinar today is basically rooftop solar policy, and rooftop solar is now a mature market. As you can see, the volumes in the industry in this market grew up to about 1,000+ megawatts. But what you can also see is that over the last 2 years, the volumes have been coming down, even notwithstanding the COVID effect this year. You know, I for one have always believed that rooftop solar is you know, the most desirable source of renewable power for India, particularly because of all the land and the transmission issues that we're facing. It is also definitely the cheapest source of power at the point of consumption, much more so in comparison to all the other utility scale renewables and other alternative and conventional technologies. Having said that, unfortunately, I do think that the rooftop solar market has not received enough of a policy thrust. The government has, I would argue, focused more on utility scale solar. And the main policy support for this market has come in from net metering policies from the states, as well as capital subsidies from MNRE, which actually many people believe hasn't really helped the market because of the various implementation issues. So if we, Aarti, if you please roll on. So, you know, I would like to think of rooftop solar as a two-faced market right now. Two-faced in the sense that the CNI consumers and the other consumers are saying, we love rooftop solar, we want more of it. It is cheaper, it is greener, it meets our compliance and the regulatory objectives. We want as much rooftop solar as we can install. On the other hand, we have the distribution companies, which don't like losing their business, which don't like losing their high-paying customers, and they are the ones who are basically canvassing or lobbying against for changes in the net metering policy. So what we have seen in the last 2 to 3 years, and this trend seems to be accelerating, is that more and more states are withdrawing or curbing the net metering benefit. And that is happening by limiting the net metering benefit to as few customers as possible, limiting the banking benefit in terms of how far you can carry forward the surplus power or how much money you get for surplus power injected into the grid, And then ultimately, discoms also want to start charging for some of the facilities provided either through banking or other such charges, etc. Now that is in addition to the various size caps which are prevalent under the various net metering policies. Not only can consumers not install systems above half a megawatt or 1 megawatt, but there are various additional caps on sizes depending upon what is the consumer connection, power requirement, consumption, etc. So as you can see in this map, if you just stick to this slide, Aarti. If you can see in this map, there are Gujarat, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu have imposed various kinds of curbs on net metering benefit, and that is more than 50%, actually much more than 50% of the total power consumption, as well as the rooftop solar market in India. So it's a pretty significant change which is happening in the market right now. Now, as I said, over the last 2 years, more and more states have been withdrawing the net metering benefit over a period of time. To some extent, this is understandable. Discoms are providing a service, and it seems illogical to expect that they should provide free net metering to all consumers at any given point of time, irrespective of size, etc. I think the point which is really which the industry is arguing for, and which we believe is right, is that the change in the policies should not be ad hoc and unpredictable the way it is right now. And this unpredictable changes to the policy are really causing huge damage to the growth prospects. If there were a system where change could be brought gradually, more visibility could be provided to the industry, and there was a graded shift from free net metering to paid net metering or some kind of a paid model or a gross metering model over time, I think that would be ideal for the growth of this market. Unfortunately, even MNRE and Ministry of Power have recently suggested that net metering benefit could be withdrawn from all consumers with connected load of more than 6 kilowatts. And I think, to my mind, I think it is only a matter of time before all states withdraw the net metering benefit completely from all consumers other than residential consumers. The other major issue around the corner for the rooftop solar market is change in slide. So the other major policy support for the market is in the form of capital subsidies for the residential rooftop solar market. MNRE has a target of 4 gigawatt installation by 2022. It is providing 20 to 40% subsidies for households depending on customer size, etc. Having said that, the scheme is running behind the targets. What we understand is that MNRE has sanctioned subsidies for around 900 megawatts as of last month, but the actual disbursement is very, very low even today, despite the fact that many states have issued empanelment tenders, and there continues to be an issue around how the subsidy process is going to be run. Are these tenders producing the right kind of results for the industry? In addition to capital subsidies, many other states have imposed a mandatory installation target for customers in Jharkhand, Punjab, Haryana, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Chandigarh, and Maharashtra. And basically, the policy says that for consumers above a certain size, depending upon their plot area or their property area, etc., they have to adopt a certain size of rooftop solar system. Now that policy, it sounds great on paper, but again, the enforcement is very poor. And we know from speaking to people on the ground that in many parts of the country, there are no deadlines, there are no targets for kind of compliance with this policy. And again, the status of that is actually unknown for most of these states. So the other issue which is around the corner for the rooftop solar industry is the possible imposition of basic customs duty. The ministry has said that a duty of 15 to 20% potentially going up to 40% in 2 to 3 years, is going to be implemented shortly. Now, the issue for rooftop solar is that it is a brutally exposed market, in my view, because utilities solar will get some benefit or protection either through grandfathering or some change in law benefit protection, etc. But rooftop solar will get no such benefit. And the impact on both cost and tariffs ultimately for the consumers is going to be pretty significant. So the question really is, as and when BCD is imposed, what kind of change or slowdown could we see in the market? Are consumers going to delay their purchase decisions? Is it going to lead to disputes between clients and contractors and developers on how to resolve the increase in cost and subsequent increase in tariff between the parties? So with that, so the discussion points for today are, I think we look at the net and the gross metering policies landscape across the country, not just what's written on paper, but what is the actual implementation status on the ground. What are the kind of delays in various states? We hear that there are delays of 3 to 6 months in various states. What is the progress in the residential rooftop solar scheme? Basic customs duty, how are developers and contractors dealing with it, given that it is imminent? And then we talk about other policy issues like BIS and ALMM requirements and any other emerging opportunities. So with that, I will turn over to my fellow panelists. And what I will do is, let me start by going to Pramod, Anuvrat, and Damian from the from the industry, EPC, and the project development heads. And let me ask you in turn. I presented the gradual withdrawal of the net metering benefit. To what extent is that hurting the industry? Do you think it is slowing down? It is damaging the growth prospects? And going forward, if net metering policy is kind of the benefit is withdrawn from all over India, then what does it mean for the rest of the states and the country and the growth prospects of this market? So let Pramod, why don't you start, and then we'll come to others.
Yeah. Good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, I think Vinay has rightly summed up the issues which are being faced by the industry. So, as an EPC and as a solution provider to the client, what usually I look for, and one is consistency in the policy. Second is uniformity as much as possible, so that when I go to a client, see, many times it happens that I'm discussing with the client with some policy in mind, and then in the middle of the discussion, I think the whole thing is hijacked by the changes which have happened. And many times, you are not able to track the changes also. So yesterday I was discussing with Vinay that tracking itself is a big issue because so many states and all that. So what we have done, I think definitely it will impact the the development of this market, where government has ambitious targets, but I think whatever has been talked about is not followed up with enabling legislation and policy. And wherever I think there are some good intentions are there, but I think on the ground it is not being seen. It is not that everything is bad. I mean, there are some states which are pretty progressive. For example, in Andhra, I think within the same city, if you are there, I think you can have a single installation to set off your consumption in 2-3 different units of the same city, something like that. And there are cases where on the ground, I think some states are much easier to work with. So when we are trying to do something in different states, we are also trying to pick and choose which are the much easier states to work with. But I think it is very difficult. Many times you get inquiries where the states are pretty difficult to navigate. So anything any consistency and uniformity definitely will help. I think. And second thing is on. Okay, we are discussing commercial and industrial, and I can very well understand the reluctance of discoms to let go this consumer sector where the tariffs are much higher, and they don't want to let go this class of consumers. But at least I am expecting in the residential sector, I think there will be a little more relaxation, so that because residentials are hugely subsidized sector in the solar industry, so or in the electricity scheme of things. So maybe at least in the residential sector, if things are pushed, I think at least that area will see some growth, so that it will contribute to the overall target to be achieved. I think I'll stop here. I think the others also can add.
Thank you, Pramod. So Anuvrat, we'll come over to you. To what extent, if you can comment upon the status of implementation of the net metering policies, how is it kind of impacting the market? Which states do you see are most active right now? And where do you see more hurdles?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. And, thank you, Vinay, as always, for organizing and, taking the trouble to bring all the industry players together and the audience as well, because these are times when we don't get these opportunities very much. So much appreciated, and a pleasure to be here. From our perspective, look, I mean, many of you are familiar. I represent Cleantech Solar, so many of you are familiar that we focus on C&I overall as a segment. And I think you've, when you put together a very wonderful timeline, which is rather clearly lays out the kind of headwinds that one has seen in one regulatory aspect, right? And on top of that, you've got BCD, then they've got other regulatory aspects as well. And you are right that the impact of it is being felt more so on the rooftop segment than on the open access segment. I mean, that said, even in the open access segment, one is facing, there can be a state that completely comes, shuts down, as some of us are familiar. So I think the way customers as well as developers are sort of handling this is that there is cost savings on power to be done using rooftop solar. It is to be done using open access offsite solar. It's to be, and some combination of that, right? The landscape of states keeps changing. So you asked me the question as to what states are good. Some are consistently sort of even-handed about it, in the sense that they tend to kind of, have had a 1 megawatt limit. And definitely that's one headwind, if you want to call it that is coming up. People are, the ERCs, the discoms in particular, are going out and absolutely making sure that the projects are, not only net metered below a megawatt, in some cases limiting the size of the entire project to a megawatt. If you ask me the states where that is happening, and Andhra is one of them, there are others too. I mean, that's causing a bigger impact, because there are times that you just want to be able to build a larger project, because it was always assumed at some level that a net metering facility will only be available up to a megawatt. But states like UP, which completely reverse their policy, or the ones that go out, to an extent like AP, and then change the policy to say net metered or otherwise, we will not let you build a project on site, which is larger than a megawatt, are having an inordinate impact on the rooftop solar segment as far as C&I is concerned, or any large projects are concerned, because volume always comes from some of the larger projects. There is, all the smaller projects are important too, but the larger projects are facing a substantial amount of headwind, and which, to Pramod's point, completely dovetails with what at some level the discoms are worried about, that losing the best customers, and if you lose more megawatts or more megawatt hours, it's worse than losing less megawatt hours. So I think,
sorry, just to interject, are you saying that the discoms are not allowing construction of a system more than 1 megawatt, even if it is not net metered?
Yes, that is also sort of, that is the latest flavor. It's in limited number of states, but this has a tendency, I mean, these things, the negative things in particular, have a tendency to flow from one state to the other. Yes, what's draconian on the other hand is whenever states start introducing ideas like it'll have to be gross metering. You can't even net meter, and sometimes states implement regulations which thankfully do not get passed, that all power from an on-site plant will have to be sent out, and essentially there is no on-site consumption, right? So, I mean, these are the kind of headwinds, and in some sense, every state is responsible for having had a sort of an idea at a particular point of time, whether the ERC let them go through, and even if the ERC went through, whether the APTEL let them go through. So, for example, today you could say, okay, in Maharashtra, net metering is now proceeding pretty fine, and the regulations even that have come about those charges isn't really being implemented right away. Some time has been given for that till such time as a certain amount of megawatts are installed. But the challenge is that this keeps changing, and Pramod has pointed that out. You pointed that out. So the changing landscape and the changing nature of policy is a bigger challenge overall, right? So I think from our perspective, if we were to sort of look at for two things, one is to conclude that, okay, if 1 megawatt is going to be a limit, right? I mean, it's not ideal. It should be really done by the transformer size, right? If the transformer in the area is able to handle a greater amount of net metering, it should be done. But fine, if it has to be just a megawatt, fine. It should be done in the manner where where everything up to that size is allowed to be built and net metered. Everything larger than that, very critically. I mean, we are a large player. I mean, we have over a 500 megawatt portfolio. Much of that is rooftop. We need big projects, and and it's big projects from people like us that essentially eke up the volume, right? That the country is trying to achieve. We really need to be able to build big projects, even if you don't net meter. As you pointed out, people find the solution in terms of saying that, okay, I may lose some portion of the power, but then overall having a 5 megawatt plant is far more beneficial in terms of total rupees savings than a 1 megawatt net metered plant where I don't lose any percent of the energy. So yes, people are doing that. I mean, last comment on this, that some of the headwinds that you might have seen in the rooftop solar arena is not just to do with regulations and the headwinds, because those have kind of in one form or the other been coming and going over the multiple years. A bit of the phenomena from this year certainly has to do with customers' attention moving a lot towards open access, which got enabled in a few states in the last year and a half or 2 years. So there's some organic aspect. I mean, let's say there's a good reason for it as well, which is not to do with the negative reasons, simply people shifting their focus to trying to displace 15 megawatts of solar power versus 3. So we've seen that as well, and they sort of pushed the rooftop next project a little bit down the pike. Yeah, those are my thoughts, Vinay.
Okay, thanks, Anuvrat. I note that you still didn't mention the states which are more active and versus others, but I think we'll come to that later in the discussion.
Sure. So, let me just do that in the sense that I was not trying to avoid. For example, you've had good policy in Andhra Pradesh, and then you've had tough policy in Andhra Pradesh. You've had good policy in UP, you've had tough policy in UP, right? You've literally seen them flip overnight. You had pretty reasonable policy in Maharashtra, and then you've had the attempt to impose very, very tough conditions, eventually, finally, luckily, sort of pushed back. So, and then Karnataka has gone from a absolutely smooth state to quite the opposite. I mean, if you're looking for consistency, perhaps I shouldn't be saying this. The only thing that is consistently challenging has of course been Gujarat, right? So right. Only in terms of OPEX kind of models. So, right. So that's the only reason. It wasn't that we particularly favor one state versus the other. Just sure. It's important to indicate the states themselves change in how they look at things, and once open access comes up, then they say, okay, net metering was fine, but if you're taking open access, I can't give you net metering. So it's a evolving landscape along with U-turns, and those are very surprising. I mean, evolving is fine. If open access comes, you say net metering, I don't want to do with open access. But the U-turns have been very surprising. And in the UP's case, to pick one, not, I mean, they've done wonderful things on solar, but to just pick a one January day and make a complete U-turn was quite exceptional.
Sure. Thank you, Anuvrat. So let's come to you, Damian. You heard what Pramod and Anuvrat had to say. How are the changes in the policy or the whole policy landscape affecting Orb's business? And again, if you can kind of answer the question, which states are more active and progressive right now in terms of execution and smooth implementation of policy versus others? Damian, I think you're muted.
Yeah, that should be better then.
Yes, thank you.
I was just saying thank you, Vinay, for organizing. I chose to participate not because I know so much about policy across India, but because I was interested to learn from the others and from yourself. So thank you for organizing. I think I will come to your question in just a minute. If you don't mind, I'll just introduce ourselves because I think sometimes we're a little bit different and some of the differences in how we go to market also influence how we see policy. So Orb Energy is a solar company that's been around and operational in India for 14 years. That's how long I've also been here. We've started off very much as an off-grid solar company. And then, of course, over time, shifted on-grid as the net metering policies came into force. We're Bangalore-based, where we also do our own manufacturing. So we're a bit of a hybrid like that. We manufacture and we sell. And interestingly enough, we also do our own financing. So we do not do PPAs. So the whole question of PPAs in Karnataka does not apply to us. We are different insofar as we do financing. We do what is like a loan. So we do 36 to 48 month credit, effectively, extended receivables to an SME. And we target SMEs who would like to have financing for their system. We do not ask for collateral. That's a totally uncollateralized financing product that we offer our customers. So because of all that, it also influences how we see things. Now, that means in Karnataka, we have been largely untouched by them, not wanting third-party PPAs to be allowed. And same would apply in Gujarat, where, as Anuvrat said, this has been consistent in not wanting PPAs. So we operate in Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. And those are our focus states to get at your question. Like the other panelists have said, we do see movement, and it's always, it's just like movement which you just don't see coming, and maybe we just don't have our ears to the ground enough, but suddenly there's this horrible proposition like what came out of Maharashtra for at the end of last financial year, and so we scrambled along with others, I guess, to try to push back a bit. And I think the industry as a whole was relatively successful. And I sort of had some faint optimism until I spoke to you today, Vinay, that might work, that as these policies come up, we could all scramble together, push back, and then see something fairly moderate emerge. I still hope that's the case as we move forward. And I do think that's one area where probably we all need to get more effective as working as an industry, is in pushing back. So net metering has been very critical to our customer value proposition. SME customers are absolutely attracted to the idea that they can offset their electricity that they would have otherwise consumed with a rooftop solar system. We're not as big as Cleantech. Cleantech has done 500 megawatts. I heard we're at just over 100 megawatts, but we service a different customer. Our average size is about 150 to 200 kilowatts, somewhere in that range. So this, of course, taking away net metering would be very detrimental to our customer base. Not least because with gross metering, you see the prices that are put on offer per kilowatt are extremely low. I mean, if somebody wants to put a very high per kilowatt hour price on it, then perhaps gross metering can work, but we all know that's not going to happen. So net metering remains vital to our customer value proposition and to I think to rooftop solar. And I mean, just to echo your points, Vinay, and that of Pramod, there is this total disconnect between the rooftop target that the center has set, and then of course our ability to execute on the ground at a state level. And it is one of these conundrums that is very hard to solve. I realize that. But it would probably be helpful if MNRE, as the proponent of solar and other renewables, took a position that net metering was essential to the industry and not the reverse. And I think that's slightly disappointing to see that that's the case. You know, and when it comes to other incentives and other things that are going on, like the capital subsidies for residential, we don't participate. As a company that used to do a lot of off-grid and still does some solar water heating, we've had our experience of trying to chase down capital subsidies, and frankly, as a company, we don't want to do it anymore. So it's really impossible to manage. It's impossible to manage your cash flow. And so I honestly think the much better way for India going forward with Rooftop is retaining net metering, which is, of course, I think all of our wish, retaining your accelerated depreciation, which gives companies an incentive to do it, and simply accepting that, you know, that actually there's so much more that could be done to reach that target, and getting a little bit of support from the center in the various sort of quasi fights that come up with the state would be very helpful. That currently we don't see at all. Maybe I'll stop there and then we can pick it up later.
Sure, Damian, we'll come back to you. So I think I will just change tack for a little while and come to Chintan. Chintan, you heard the views of various of the three companies, but you know, financing has been an equal challenge, if not a more significant challenge for the industry, particularly for the smaller customers, the SME customers, the residential rooftop solar customers, etc. So far, the government has procured a line of credit from World Bank, but that's mainly gone towards larger developers and larger customers. I know IREDA has been trying to finance rooftop solar, but not with great success. At least that's my impression. So if you can maybe just fill us in on IREDA's financing activities and to what extent you think there are financial solutions around the corner, or could be potential financial solutions for other categories of customers to kind of meet the hidden demand in the market.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, Chintan, you are. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinay. So a bit about IREDA. IREDA stands for Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency. We are a specialized NBFC that finances RE projects, and we also finance RE manufacturers as well as developers. So we've been doing this from last 32 years, and we're going to continue to do that. As far as rooftop solar is concerned, just wanted to tell you that IREDA has financed till now about 40 megawatts of rooftop solar, and another 30 megawatt is under pipeline. So considering that we don't have a branch beyond Delhi, it's a decent amount of megawatts that we have done, since the project size is so small. And I would also be very clear over here, our interest rates are much higher than what State Bank of India is offering. In spite of that, we have got business. So what it shows is interest is definitely very important, but it's more to do with how well you understand this subject matter and the risk associated with rooftop solar. So we understand it the most. Having said that, at this juncture, we are at a very advanced level of negotiating a deal with two multinational FIs to have our own line of credit for rooftop solar. So that would also make us competitive on the pricing. That is something that we will be launching somewhere either the end of the last quarter of this year or latest by the first quarter of next year. So that is something that we'll be launching, and we'll be launching for the entire gamut. It will be for residential, for CNI, for RESCO models, for aggregated demand by the government, for aggregators, NBFC aggregators, for manufacturers, for developers, and so on and so forth, and also for the DCR market and the non-DCR market also. So we will be launching this entire product range with different levels of securities and substitution rights on the security side. We have been having rounds of discussion with various stakeholders, and we are open to ideas in terms of what sort of issues that developers or the borrowers are facing from the lenders, so that we can streamline those. But having said that, one of the model that I personally feel needs to be pushed in a big way is government aggregated model. We've been seeing an aggregated model launched by Madhya Pradesh. We have a similar thing happening at Kerala level. So the whole idea is, if the government itself is, or government institution is aggregating in a demand, the issues on the policy front would be handled to a great extent. It is good for the lender, it's good for the investor. So I think that's one thing. And if you have an aggregated capacity, you are able to then give line of credit to the variety of people who are bidding for this aggregated capacity, because you have standardization over there. We've been seeing that in railways. Railways has been aggregating demands, and we've been seeing one single project of 19 megawatt, 18 megawatt based on the bid happening. It's easier for a lender to reduce the transaction cost, and it's also good for the developer to reduce the transaction cost. So this is something which is one particular model that IREDA would like to push, which is a state government or institution-based aggregated model. Another model that IREDA is now working upon is something known as line of credit, which will be given up to either the developer, or it can also be given up to NBFCs or microfinancial institutions, where essentially we give a sanction for a larger size project, say 100 megawatt or 50 megawatt or 20 megawatt, whatever the case may be. There will be a broad sanction, and the sanction would have a overall parameter of the projects that you will be putting up. And we can agree on a lot size of 2 megawatt or 5 megawatt. So please go and execute those projects within the boundary conditions of the sanction, and you can get a reimbursement from IREDA. So again, that money gets released for the applicant. Again, put up another 2 to 5 megawatt project. Again, go for a reimbursement. And the reason of pushing this model is the gestation period in solar rooftop is so less. Going on a pro rata disbursement practically makes no sense, and it also increases transaction cost. So better that you execute the project in a period of 3 months or 2 months, whatever the case may be, and take a reimbursement. We would be also offering a product for a supplier's credit. Particular places where the RESCO model cannot be created, you might have a captive model. And the captive, you might have issues in terms of rating of the customers. So what we can do is we can essentially give a line of credit to the supplier, and supplier gives a supplier's credit as a lease model, so that you can recover your money over a couple of years. And that's how the financing can come into picture. And yes, direct financing is something which IREDA may not be very good at, because we don't have branch offices beyond Delhi. Otherwise, direct financing has been pursued by various banks. State Bank of India is there. You have PNB who has been doing it. That is a one particular market segment which IREDA cannot get into, but indirectly through various NBFC linkages and various small bank linkages, we can offer this product in a big way. That's all I had to say at this juncture. There are certain issues in rooftop solar, essentially to do with mortgage creation and security creation, but that is something that needs to be, it's an evolving methodology, and on the substitution rights. And I think we'll have to live with it. And I think most of the lenders are accepting now, based on the credibility and the credit rating of the, or the credit record of the applicant or the borrower or the developer, whatever the case may be. Over to you, Vinay.
Okay, thanks, Chintan. I think that's very, very positive news, and I'm sure all the other panelists in the audience are delighted with that news. So just a quick question. What is the size of these facilities? If you can just give us some little idea, because what you mentioned in terms of covering the various customer segments and the lines of credit definitely sounds very, very positive.
In the first round of funding that we are negotiating right now, we'll be having something like $100 to $125 million of this facility available with us. But it's not limited to that. Our total target is across 3 years is about close to $500 to $700 million. But we are starting with about $100 to $120 million, and that, as I said, would be launched somewhere by the first quarter of next year. It is a very, very advanced stage of negotiation.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you, Chintan. So let's move on. Come to you, Arijit. I briefly mentioned about the risk of basic customs duty. I know that rooftop solar consumers as well as suppliers are basically by and large keen to use imported modules because of various technology, cost, and other considerations. How do you suppose you must be very close to all these consumers? How do you think they are kind of mitigating the risk of customs duty, which seems to be around the corner? And to what extent, if you can kind of give us a view, is it going to harm or slow the growth in the industry?
Good evening to all the panelists, and thank you, Vinay, for taking up this issue. I would not consider this as an issue. We are not against implementation of any duties as such, but we have to understand that what is the purpose of implementation of any duty. First of all, what we are trying to do, we are trying to discourage the consumers or the contractors to buy modules from outside of India, and we are trying to encourage the Indian module manufacturing industry. In that way, is it not better to first empower the industry, the domestic industry, to manufacture in a better way, empower the whole supply chain within India? So how we will increase or how we will grow without a robust supply chain available within this country? If not, there is no point of penalizing the consumers at the end of the day. Any manufacturer, they are not going to pay the duties from their own pocket. At the end of the day, the manufacturers were actually paying, and the industry in a way getting discouraged with this kind of impositions. In that way, I think, okay, any kind of duties, implementation of duties are welcome. We should have our Indian manufacturing industries, and instead of being an assembly house of modules industry, we should become a full-scale module manufacturing country. But to do that, first, government and policymakers will have to understand how to improve the manufacturing environment, not by imposing any duty. Secondly, when it comes to the implementation, India, in that way, we are very, very judicial country. We do not impose any duties in a very erratic manner. We do it in a very judicial way. But the communication have to be long term. Any implementation of duties will not affect the utility consumers too much because they will have a lot of protections. But in terms of the rooftop and small IPPs, for them there is no protection available. So when there is any implementation, such implementation happens, then it becomes an immediate, their whole mathematics goes into a toss. A contractor, they started working on a particular mathematics, and developers understood that. They worked on some few aspects which are suiting them. Suddenly, if there is any change in the pricing, which in terms of if there is any change in the duty, then it becomes very difficult. As such, India as a country are very, very dependent on many other global aspects, which we understand. It controls our industry. So this is something which is, I think, it's not viable for our industry, and specifically it harms rooftop segment up to a very big way. So I feel we should be little more communicative when it comes to implementation of any duty, and again rethink about, as a whole, as an industry, we should rethink about whether these duties should be implemented before we are ready or we are equipped with our own supply chain. And I'm sure all of our panelists will agree to that. So
okay, thanks.
I'd like to add to what
Pramod, sorry, just give me a minute. I'm conscious that Damian has to leave a little early, so I'll just give Damian a quick chance. But basically, I want to put this question to all of you, Damian, Pramod, and Anuvrat. How are you managing this risk of a duty potentially being imposed very, very imminently. I mean, is there a way that you're kind of building it in your contracts to structure, to share the risk with your customers? Or, I don't know, is there a change in law clause, et cetera, et cetera? How are you managing this risk? So Damian, I'll come to you first and then I'll go to others.
Let me unmute myself this time. Look, I mean, we sort of felt this would come, this day would come, and it has come. About 5-6 years ago, we took a decision to get into manufacturing at a smaller scale, but we still saw that we could be competitive with the landed cost of a module that was coming in from China. And that remains the case today. Even though our manufacturing is just under 100 megawatts, we find that with the duty, we are able to be cheaper than what we could buy from China at our scale. So I have to say that we took that decision to do it early. Now, of course, cells still come from China. Cells still come from China and Taiwan, and we procure those. And we've always argued for a differentiated tariff on modules versus cells, because obviously the first way to build the supply chain in India is to encourage module manufacturing and then backward integrate after that time into cells. I am a little more upbeat that we can do this in India. I am sure we cannot do it at the same cost as China now, having reached the scale that you see in China and the level of both scale and automation. But I am encouraged that we can do this in India and we can grow domestic manufacturing in India. I agree with Arijit that it takes time. So I think things have to be phased in over time. But we as a company, the way we responded was to actually enter into manufacturing, to answer your question.
Thank you, Damian. Just a quick announcement. My colleague is going to put up a poll. But please, I think we can carry on with the webinar while you answer and respond to this poll. So let me come to you, Pramod. What is your view on customs duty and how are you mitigating it? And then, Anuvrat, if you can also answer it from Cleantech's point of view.
Yeah. Okay, so as far as custom duty is concerned, I think government has made its intention very clear. I think they are going to impose, but I think there is some confusion as to how much and when. I think when this announcement was made in the last finance bill, 20%, I think they made a mistake that they put 20% straight away there, and then they didn't mention exactly when they are going to impose it. I think the idea, to start with, was that when the safeguard duty ends by 30th of July, I think they wanted to bring it in. But then I think things didn't work out that way. I think different departments in the government, didn't talk to each other or didn't communicate with each other, but safeguard duty extended. So the government intention was to keep the total duty as 20%, is what I felt. So if total has to be kept as 20%, then I think the balance has to be 5% only. They have to impose custom duty. So then to make that change again, they have to go to Parliament and get it amended. I think that is where I think the things got stuck. So I expect them that they may put this in the next Parliament session and try to make it clear. But I think that is where the things. Maybe I think they will change it to maybe 5% or 10%, so that overall duty will be 25% for the industry. But if they had put 20%, then 20 plus on top of it 14 or 14.9% of safeguard would have made it very uncompetitive for people to set up solar plants or whatever. Whoever had plants, I think they would have had relooked at those the plants. So I think that is where I think clear communication is very important. That everyone know that the sword is hanging, but when it will fall, nobody knows. But maybe if they can clearly mention their route for the duty imposition and all, I think that will help. And how we are managing it, I think transparency is the best way. I think when we talk to the customers, I think we always tell them that this is what is happening in the market, and we keep very clear wording in the contract, so that okay, change in law and all vague things may be there, but I think it is better to put very clear wording related to duty imposition. I think that will help. That is what we are trying to do with most of our customers.
Okay. And Anuvrat, how is Cleantech managing the potential risk of BCD?
Yeah, Vinay, so obviously all of us have seen this movie before. That's sort of the first comment, right? And we've seen this movie a few times before, right?
Yeah.
So it's so people are fairly practiced at it. We are like, customers included, some customer may be new, but then they are at least aware of such things having happened or whatever, right? So I think me ask, how do people put it into contracts? Do they have a preset agreement like how to distribute? Do you have to absorb the impact? Do you have to sort of plan for better supply chain, better planning, or do you sort of delay projects to kind of manage the overall costing and stuff like that? The answer to that is yes. Okay. Which is that, yeah, all of the above, and in some combination one does all of these things. But broadly, I think Pramod pointed out very well, customers and developers fully understand it. Suppliers also to a degree understand it and try to enable the others by trying to absorb some of the impact. And net between the three parties, or at least these three parties, and then there is the EPCs who absorb some of the impact and kind of have to lower their sort of costing a bit, the ones who work for developers. Net this gets absorbed between various parties, and sort of to some degree life goes on. The uncertainty is what is extremely detrimental to the overall process and the volume. Because if anyone knew exactly what's going to happen, and uncertainty means that people have to evaluate all kinds of possibilities, and that's just an extra month to close an EPC contract in the case of, say, Orb Energy, or a sort of PPA contract in the case of all the developers like ourselves. The uncertainty is what is best to be avoided in sort of our perspective. And taking a slightly sort of stepping back a bit and taking a more sort of global view of these things, I think we have sort of many industry participants here. In addition to the panelists, we have like a huge audience here of over 150 people. I think, and I've shared this a few times, that we should all be appreciative of the kind of industry we work in, that how enabled it is by virtue of its costing, right? You have the ability to deliver rooftop or on-site to the customer at around 3.5 to 4 rupees per unit, depending on the circumstances. You have the ability to deliver off-site solutions to the similar customers, perhaps closer to like 5.5 rupees, depending on the charges in the state and various things, right? Possibly even lower. We all at least need to appreciate what we have, and we know that they're comparing and having to compare with a 7 or 8 rupee price, right? Collectively, between all of us, we have somewhere between 3 to 4 rupees of value to play with, right? To kind of figure out solutions within. And that, I think, is in the end the critical takeaway, right? Net metering will come, net metering will go away. And regulators may become more disciplined, they may be less disciplined. We really sort of have to try to mature as an industry, while at the same time always pointing to areas like residential rooftop solar and saying this cannot survive unless you follow a very consistent, very good policy, for example, net metering or what have you, right? Anything that is nascent, where all of us were, as for the solar general industry like 10 years ago, applies to some segments, and fully appreciate that we'll have to take care of those segments in a regulatory way. But I think it's fair to say that the industry has moved on to matters between two consenting parties, right? And they can sort of solve the problem to an extent using the kind of overall savings. Yes, no consumer wants to see their savings of potentially 3.5 rupees go away to 2.5 rupees or whatever. But the bottom line is that I guess as it said, right, a healthy compromise leaves all parties equally unhappy. So there are ways of reaching such healthy compromises, and That's kind of that's how we approach it. We don't worry too much about a particular state. I do want to go back a bit. So for example, states which have never had, like Tamil Nadu's never had net metering, right? It's fine. Projects then do get done. Everybody knows precisely what one has to do. They do happen 1 year later because you need a bigger gap from the grid, but then they happen. So, so that's sort of our take on BCDs, net meterings, and all other things of the world. So long as you let people build a project, they will build it. But you know, it gets really tough when people prevent people from building a project or building a project above a certain size. That is kind of not acceptable.
Sure, sure. Could we, I'm just very keen to understand what are the, apart from what is actually written on the policy paper, what are the actual execution challenges on the ground in terms of the net metering policy? Like going back to one of my earlier points, I mean, we hear about many states taking as long as 6 months or the paperwork being very, very cumbersome. So, again, I would just request Pramod, Damian, and Anuvrat to kind of go through, just tell us which states are very, very challenging for you right now, and what are the kind of issues you're facing on the implementation side?
Yeah, I think you already mentioned some of the things in your question itself, that on the ground, sometimes the TAT takes too much time and there is no single window. I think especially in Maharashtra and Gujarat, I think you have to run around to at least 3 to 4 agencies to go and get the things done. So I think 6 months I have not heard, but I think it takes anywhere between 6 weeks to 3 months sometimes, depending on the particular cases. So there is no single window. So if they enable a single window, I think that will be a great enabler. And second issue which we face on the ground is of meters. So many times, they stipulate that the meters have to be bought from them and to be tested by them, and many times they don't have stocks of meters where we have to wait for those. Maybe if they allow us to buy the meters outside and get it tested or calibrated in front of them, I think that would also help. But these are some of the issues. See, it is not that everything is bad, but some things. But I think there are some examples, again case to case basis where there have been things which have been smoothly happening. But overall, if you look at the things, maybe I think in 60-70% of the cases there will be delays because of these lack of single window or lack of equipment or lack of clarity on exactly. And this most important is many of these approving agencies may not be knowing the change in their own policies, like the communication has not gone to them on the ground. So those also we have faced in a couple of cases. So but otherwise I think things are a mixed bag. I would say that not everything is bad, but at the same time not everything is great.
Right, right. Okay, Anuvrat, which states do you find very challenging in terms of execution?
Actually, so on this front, I broadly have a very positive, status to report, and then so you've got to give credit where credit is due, right?
Sure, sure.
Broadly, yeah. Over the past 3 years, let's not say 5, because net metering was sort of barely happening in the early 15 and 16 time frame. But over the past 3 years, consistently, it's gotten fairly well understood by whether the discoms and the others, or the people on the ground. It has become relatively clear, and even if the policy is somewhat let's say challenging in the sense that, say, Andhra Pradesh has a challenging policy that you really don't want you to build projects above 1 megawatt, and it seems unfair. It's one of the fastest states in terms of getting your net metering done. It pretty much happens in 3 weeks to 4 weeks time. And I completely take Pramod's view on board, which is it's anywhere between 4 weeks to possibly 12 weeks. But given what all we have experienced, all of us have experienced, 4 weeks to 12 weeks seems very wonderful to me. I mean, and that's that would be my comment, that it's happening fairly consistently. all regulators have learned from each other from different states. I mean, the regulators from one state have learned from the other, and they broadly seem to know how to do it. We've rarely gotten stuck where you started assuming there's net metering and then you just couldn't get it done, kind of a thing. It's always the other challenges. Oh no, we've recently had open access projects. Because of open access we can't do this, or that your subsidy will go away because subsidy was supposed to come with you not consuming any solar or any net metering, other benefits. Those kind of things are the bigger issue. Policy confusion, as Pramod pointed out, that the lack of clarity on the policy, and 1 year later then they clear that up. But overall, net metering is being done fine wherever it is permitted under whatever regulations is being permitted.
Okay, thanks, Anuvrat. Would you agree, Damian? I mean, do you see any particular problem states? And what percentage of your systems that you install are net metered?
Almost all of what we install are net metered. So the one state where we see a lot of customers opting out of the approval process is Tamil Nadu, where they just might install a zero export device and just kind of use it as captive power. I think that does speak to the fact that customers themselves find that approval process very challenging. So that would be one state where there are challenges. Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, as the other panelists said, are very reasonable in terms of time. The only challenge in Karnataka is about 500 kilowatts. It goes to the regulator for approval, and there you can get stuck. There you can get stuck for a couple of months. But otherwise, without that, it's sort of 4-week time frame is definitely what is achieved. Maharashtra, Gujarat, yeah, Maharashtra is a bit slow, but I think I agree with everybody that probably the bigger issues is the issue of net metering, that this sort of regulatory side has been ironed out to an extent, and that what we have is probably not what the best we could hope for, but we can be somewhat satisfied with it as an industry. I don't think it's the crux. The crux is really the net metering, because that drives the customer value proposition. And if customers get turned off of the product, then there's no need for the regulatory process at all. Right?
Okay, so given that net metering is so critical to the sector, to this market, and we know the direction in which we are headed, does it create any positive new opportunities for the market? For example, the most obvious one I'm thinking about is storage. Is storage finally beginning to make inroads, particularly in the C&I market, because customers want to install a bigger system, they want to store the power rather than inject into the grid, for example?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. I think we still find whenever we do our numbers that when you add storage, the economics are very challenging for the customer. So right. I think we're still waiting for that cost of storage to come down. It's a bit like how we were all waiting for the cost of PV to come down at one point, right, to make grid-connected PV viable. So yeah. I'm sure we are actively looking for those niche segments or customers where we could do it, but as of yet, it seems indeed it remains challenging on an economics point of view.
Right. Anuvrat, is storage or any other new technology or business model, which is kind of coming up as a new opportunity in the market?
So Vinay, overall, I mean, all of this is enabling the move towards storage, in particular, I mean, battery storage primarily, and people are definitely setting up teams to start exploring that area. That's sort of how we should look at it, because as of today, as Damian pointed out, losing that power is a better solution, a cheaper solution than than it is to try to install storage or like some other solution. So largely it stays, I mean, it's in that realm, but but it's definitely gotten close enough, both in terms of costing of storage and in terms of sort of the value. For example, some people can be off the entire Sunday, right, entire weekend or entire Sunday, where it becomes the impact is such that you have a reasonable amount of value in trying to sort of at least consider a system. So I think that's how I would That's where I would put it. But it's round the corner, and it's often been round the corner for multiple years. But this time, it really feels like round the corner. Vinay, you're on mute, I think. Vinay, I think you're on mute.
Vinay, we've lost your audio. No, actually, no. We seem to have lost your audio. I'm sorry, if you could all hold on a second, we'll just resolve this. You want to join?
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now?
You're cutting out a bit, but we can hear you. We can at least hear you now. Vinay, we still can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that time we could.
Hello, I hope the audience can hear me.
Okay, I just wanted to move, and I wanted to ask Arijit as well as the other panelists, how is the LM
I actually missed out. I couldn't hear your question. Can you repeat, Vinay, if possible? No, I can't hear again.
Tell them that just give me 1 minute.
Yeah, now you're okay, Vinay.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I think I was just going to change the line of discussion and go to BIS and ALMM. Given that module technology and the other solar technology, etc., is changing so rapidly, and we have these BIS and ALMM requirements, how are they? Is that process now fairly well settled, or is that still posing execution challenges and delays? Arijit, why don't you answer that, and then other people can come join the discussion.
Again, Vinay, these regulations are always welcome. BIS, LLM, whatever it is, these regulations are welcome, but the implementation time, that becomes a bottleneck. The module technology is growing in such a rapid way. We are having a lot of improvement in the module technology, lot of changes in module technology. Our power winds are every day going up. In every 6 months, there are new models which are coming up, and getting BIAs becomes very counterproductive. When we already started our HIMO 5 series, which is more than 530 and up to 545. We cannot sell it in India. We sell it outside India already. Already all the certificates have been taken, but we cannot sell it in India because the BIS is taking so much of time. Now, all the BIS standards, the regulations, they are exactly same as per IC certificate. So what is the purpose again to implement this kind of regulations? Yes, if you have, definitely there must be some purpose wise when they're sitting there to implement the policies, but the purpose need to be implemented in such a way that it cannot be counterproductive for the industry. So regulations required, certificates are required, so that there are there are a lot of companies like us who are technology concerns, we can survive. There will be, we can keep those companies out who are not quality conscious. So in that way, it's always welcome, but the implementation need to be done in a way so that it is not counterproductive for the industry. That's something I believe it's submission from my side.
ನೋಡಿ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಟೈಮ್ ಸಿಕ್ತು.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask Pramod and Anuvrat, have you faced any particular issues on LMM or BIS yet?
I echo what Arijit has told. The latest models will not be able to buy because of these regulations. Like, as you rightly said, 530 watt peak is selling across the world, but is not able to sell in India. Is the same thing I think is happening. See, the BIS process is pretty established now, but I think it takes time. All said and done, it takes time. The sample has to be brought, it has to be tested and approved and so maybe I think if they can make it agnostic of what peak, as long as the technology is same, or I think that will definitely help. Otherwise, I think it will create delays for global model manufacturers to sell in India, because always there will be a 2 to 3 month lag.
Yeah, Vinay, basically I echo both Arijit and Mr. Pramod's comments, which are that these are all, whether it's BCD or the regulatory changes, uncertainty, or for that matter the time that these BIS approvals take for every new module. These are all friction. They just introduce friction, right? We cannot get the latest technology that perhaps is available elsewhere. They just introduce friction and kind of end up lessening the pie for the overall sort of consumers in solar industry in India, the consumers of power. I mean, a net goal has to be somewhat protected and good way. Basically enable our industry, which is the provider of employment, to have as cheap power as they possibly can, and to build 3 factories instead of 2. And that will happen if you really make things smooth and frictionless. So it's a sort of very high level comment, but essentially that's what it is. Yes, due to BIS, we do not get the latest technology. One sort of mitigating comment related to that, India is not a price leader. It's a price leader with respect to customers on the downward side, right? So it's not that not having the very latest technology hurts us as much as it would a country which absolutely needed, the very best use of the rooftop space, at whatever the price might be, kind of a thing. So that's something to factor in. But there's always some mitigating factors, that it's okay, but it's not the biggest concern that we are not getting absolutely the latest. But it's just one more aspect of friction, and you might have a transaction planned. For example, with LONGi, right? You may have a transaction planned, and then that transaction can't go through because new BIS requirement just came in or something. And these are the kind of things one doesn't want. They add time, uncertainty, and occasionally a loss of deal.
Sure. Thank you, Anuvrat. So Chintan, thank you for patiently listening to us. I wanted to ask you, I mean, there are these kinds of various policy issues that we have heard about on net metering, BCD, of course, BIS and LMM, etc. As a financier, how do you look at these issues? Do they Do they worry you, or what kind of view do you take on the market as a debt financier?
I think people have been mixing the BCD matter with the market. I think these two are independent of each other. The BCD implication has got a huge bearing on centrally bidded projects, which are very, very competitive. We saw the latest price that came in at ₹2.01. Now that makes this market very sensitive to any such taxation, under which the change of flow is anyway there. As far as the rooftop segment is concerned, you have a fair amount of arbitrage. I think that there's an adequate arbitrage to take up any hiccups in any rooftop segment. However, the policy framework, and I mean to say India is a federal country and every state government has got its own view to demand side management. So this is something which is evolving, but I think it's a fairly large market. Even today also we may talk about certain issues and certain states for rooftop segment. I think, but there are a lot of other states where the rooftop segment is quite open. So I think that is something which is evolving. We've been seeing that in the past also in renewables. You'll not find every state having a similar framework, equal opportunity across India in one time. That never happens. So certain states are definitely more progressive. Some states are following up. So, but on a longer perspective, I think it would definitely come into picture in terms of the demand side management that rooftop tries to cater to. And now, more importantly, because of post-COVID, you have a fair amount of matters going towards work from home. So you have a fair amount of power consumption happening in the residential area during the afternoon in the urban areas, which was never the case before. So obviously even the load profile is changing, and it would make a great sense for people to put in rooftop. Actually, is actually beneficial for the distribution company, because the moment you are generating electricity near the consumer area, you essentially help them in reducing distribution losses. While the fixed cost is still to be covered by the distribution company. So at the end of the day, it's financially beneficial to most of the distribution company, which has got a fair amount of density of load. Now that is something, a market segment we are seeing that in Delhi. Delhi, the distribution companies themselves are pushing the rooftop solar. It makes a great sense, economic sense to them. That sort of an awareness, that sort of education needs to be carried upon. So urban areas, definitely rooftop has a great sense, provided you got roof. That's the biggest question in a rooftop in the urban area. But I think in the tier 2 city, doesn't have an issue on the rooftop side. So this is going to continue, and I don't think people need to be more concerned about the BCD part or all these things, because I think there's a huge market otherwise also for the domestic manufacture, which has now been opened up by the government of India. So I think we are talking about two separate matters which were not directly linked to each other. Yes, definitely any increase of taxation definitely reduces the viability. But when you have a massive arbitrage in the rooftop segment, I think that this particular market segment definitely can take up that additional load that may come in. That's what I had to say. But as a lender, as a banker, we go by a prudential norm. So we are normally agnostic to such things. So we do our own sensitivity when we do financing of a project, and if it becomes a part of our prudential norms, we go ahead with the project. We don't have an issue with that.
Thank you, Chintan. So unfortunately, it looks like Mr. Amitesh Sinha is not able to join us, but we have a few questions from the audience. So one of them is actually about financing. So there is a question that rooftop solar receivables, asset-backed finance is apparently very big in the US market. Why is securitization not a viable option in India? Securitization, I presume, from PPA receivables under OPEX-based projects. Chintan, are you able to comment on that?
This is when you want to securitize or you want to have an asset-based securities or creation of financing for that, the key element that lies in the project getting stabilized. Number one, the revenue cycle is recorded at least for 1 year, and the third thing is the off-takers rating is the key part to it. So if you have a rating of AA plus of the off-taker, in which you have entered into a contract with, and the project has been commissioned and stabilized, I think we will not find a problem in India also. But a major problem that comes to India is most of the off-takers either would have a inferior rating, or they may not be having rating at all, because bulk of your CNI segment, essentially MSME segment, don't borrow money. And you don't borrow money, you don't have a rating. Now that is a major issue in India. So we have been talking with various financial institutions, DFIs, if we can create a payment security mechanism where essentially you have partial risk cover coming up because of a good segment of MSME or an SME who doesn't have rating, but their balance sheet is good. So we need to bridge that gap, and I think a lot of people are working on this particular model, and I think in due course of time that would be done also.
Okay, and the next question is, somebody has asked, given that there is so much policy uncertainty and the industry is desperately seeking clarity and visibility, why can't the industry make a representation to the ministry and to the discoms that please, provide more visibility to the industry? Don't make abrupt, unpredictable policy moves. I mean, is that has any representation been made to the government or to any other government agencies?
I'll not be able to answer this question. I think this has to be more with ministry.
Sure. No, but I'm asking, I think this question maybe Pramod and Anuvrat can answer this. I know there is a distributed solar power producers association. Has anything been done on this front at all? Pramod or Anuvrat, are you able to answer that?
I think many industry bodies and many associations have already represented. We are also part of a couple of them. So some of the problems are not only distributed solar or rooftop; they cut across even utility scale solar. So part of that, and representations have been made. And government is also aware of some of the issues the industry is facing. Only thing is, I think different arms of the government have different priorities. So sometimes, one priority of one arm may not be the priority for the other. So when things come together, maybe that time I think things get sorted out. Until that time, I think we keep representing and asking for clarity. See, ultimately, what industry wants clarity. That's what I think in the opening remarks I mentioned that consistency is what I think we need. So if that is there, I think industry will find a way to work anyway.
Sure. Okay, I think in the interest of time, we will like to close the panel discussion here. Thank you to all the panelists for their expert insights. Very, very interesting and useful, I think. If I just want to conclude, I think, my takeaways are that yes, there has been a disconnect in policy making between center and states to some extent. I think Anuvrat made the point that the U-turns are very, very damaging. So we need more policy visibility. And I think Chintan rightly mentioned that, at least, what we have, Chintan, and in fact, many other panelists mentioned that we have, a huge opportunity in front of us. Rooftop solar has a huge cost advantage over and above the grid power that's supplied to customers. So, I think it is able to take into account the fact that there is a duty risk potentially around the corner, the fact that there may be some other challenges or implementation hurdles. So ultimately, I think there is much to look forward to. I think the industry growth prospects are amazing. So I think on that note, I would like to conclude the discussion and pass over to my colleague, Sangeeta, for final closing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinay. Thank you, Vinay, and thank you all the panelists. Thank you for this extremely interesting session and sharing your insights. I would once again like to thank our sponsors, Tata Power Solar and LONGi, as well as a strategic partner, Indo-German Energy Forum, for supporting our initiatives. Finally, thank you, audience, for being a part of this webinar. We will be sharing the recording for today's session to your registered email account. We will also be posting the video on our events page at bridgteindia.com. Our next event is the is called Evolving Module Technology Landscape in India, and we will be holding it later this month. Until then, it's goodbye from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.